स्वस्तिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमम् ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आनः शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सेदसादनम् प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामवित्र्यवतु गणेशाय नमः सरस्वत्यै नमः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम्।
Hey Satwam, what is happening? What do you have for me today?
Hello Raghu, getting you the headlines. Coronavirus highlights. India records 1,685 new cases, 3 deaths in 24 hours. President Zelensky appeals to Russia again for peace talks. BCCI plans to start Women's IPL by 2023.
Okay Satwam, I get it. Now tell me this. What is happening with the technology in India?
Getting you the headlines. Work from home helps married women return to work, says Google India GTech Customer Experience Vice President Madhuri Dugirala. Madhuri Dugirala takes up Green India Challenge. India draws tech dreamers back home. Madhuri Dugirala has spoken to the Seattle Times. Ordinary women can do ordinary things in an extraordinary way, says Madhuri Dugirala.
Okay, that seems interesting. Hey Satwam, get me more information on Madhuri Dugirala.
Getting you that information. Madhuri Dugirala has more than 20 years of technology industry experience across the globe, with a strong experience in managing, building, and delivering end-user products and services, cloud platform solutions, and scaled ad services that serve millions of customers, resulting in high revenues for the organization, while staying on the leading edge of the technology landscape. She describes herself as an engineer by profession, a singer by passion, globetrotter by interest, and a social volunteer by choice. She joined Google in 2016 and she is currently the Vice President for GTech Customer Experience at Google India, which is a team that plays critical role in Google's success, supporting sales teams, advertisers, and products that enhance business potential. Their team vision is to be trusted experts enabling world-class vendor operations to drive customer success. Her last stint was as the Senior Director of Engineering at Microsoft, where she spent 12 years, 8 years of which was spent in Seattle. Prior to that, she worked at a broadband wireless startup and services organization for 6 years, primarily in Europe, India, and North America. She is a strategic thinker, highly results-driven, passionate mentor who values inclusiveness and diversity and deeply believes in aligning teams around a common mission and goals to deliver high impact. Built and led strong, high-performing and talented teams, created an environment to empower and motivate team members to bring their best and achieve maximum potential. On a personal front, she is married to Satya, who is an engineering director in Salesforce, Hyderabad. They have 12-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, Nirvan and Moksha. As a family, they enjoy traveling across the world. In her free time, she enjoys music, meditation, and reading. She also spends time during weekends teaching math and English to high school kids in rural areas of India via the internet with a hope to inspire them to utilize education to build a better future.
Okay, that sounds great. Add it to my favorite topic and follow her.
Adding Madhuri Dugirala to your favorites. If you're interested, there is a Satsangatve Nisangatvam episode 2 with Madhuri Dugirala that is starting shortly from 7:30 pm. There is just one spot open to book.
Oh, yes, no doubt. Book me the spot right now.
Participation confirmed for the satsang. Enjoy!
Satvam, have you booked the spot? Sat, oh, I'm already in the meeting. All right, I could see all the future leaders have joined together along with our beloved sister, Madhuri Tigirala. All right, let's put an official start here. Sairam, brothers and sisters, I would like to welcome one and all for a beautiful evening, Satsangatve and Sangatvam. So it's my pleasure to introduce such a dynamic guest, Madhuri Tigirala. So thanks for the AV. It was the digital introduction. It was so fantastic, and I welcome one and all once again. I do not want to waste any more time here, and let's have a time with Madhuri Tigirala's sister here. Over to sister Sairam, brothers and sister.
Sairam, even before we ask Mrs. Dugirala to come on board, let me tell you, brothers and sisters who are on this call, Mrs. Dugirala is an ordinary woman who does extraordinary work the ordinary way. There's a slight correction there. And thank you, Srimati Dugirala Garu, for coming on board today. And it's always a pleasure to have you in the series of the National Leadership Program. I know what kind of value you would add to this program. And I will leave it to you right now. The pitch is yours. The batting is yours. The fielders are yours. The wickets are yours. You can go ahead and bat. Stay blessed. And thanks for accepting our invitation every time we ask you to come on board. I know you're a very, very busy lady, but I know you're also not in Hyderabad right now. You're sitting somewhere outskirts of Bangalore and you're taking this call from a hotel or a resort. Thank you for being there with us. Over to you, Mrs. Dugirala.
Sairam, brothers and sisters, Sairam Gopanaya and everyone else. I really consider it a blessing and privilege to be here, and it's only possible because of the divine blessings from Swami and my constant inspiration and motivation from Gopanaya. So I know that being here is a destiny, and it won't never happen if it is not for Swami and Gopanaya. So I have huge gratitude to them. On that note, I really want to express my humble pranams at the feet of Bhagavan, and I want to chant something for him before I begin our session today. I've really believed that whatever I am today, it is because of Swami, and he has been my guru and guiding light since a very young age, since I was a teenager. So that's why I think these two chants really express my gratitude to him. Ananta samsara samudratara naukayitabhyam guru bhaktidabhyam vairagya samra jadapujanabhyam namo namaha Shri Guru Padukabhyam. This means salutation to the sandals of my Guru, who is a boat, who helps me cross the endless ocean of life who endows me with a sense of devotion, and by worship I attain renunciation. And I'll explain you throughout my session today why do I consider Swami to be a boat in my life. Otherwise, I could have never crossed this life and all the things which come in the life in many ways. And I also know that this is a huge ocean and there you need blessings of somebody as well, which is why this is another one which I always dedicate to Swami. Aneka janma samprapta karma bandha vidahine atmagyana pradanena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Salutations to that glorious Guru, who by bestowing the knowledge of the self has burnt away the very bondage of actions in a whiff, which had even though taken infinite lives to accumulate. I say this because I feel extremely blessed to be a devotee of Swami, and I consider that I may have done something in many, many lives to be part of this as well. Today I'm talking to you as a
Madhuri, 1 minute. Madhuri, 1 minute. May I ask at least about 6 or 7 participants to come on camera? I don't want her to speak to a blank screen. It's always good to see some bright young faces when you're speaking, actually. What do you think, Madhuri? Is it good?
Absolutely. It is you and your energy which will make this session very inspiring.
Yeah. Somebody, yeah, that's nice. Thank you so much. Very nice. Go ahead. Sorry, Ma.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, again, for joining the session. Firstly, if you're all wondering, is there any connection between leadership and spirituality? In my personal life and professional life, I do think there is a connection. And today I want to share a few stories, a few learnings. More than anything, today I want to share with you some of my experiences of leading in crisis and leading in complexity and what leadership is all about. Because I do want to mystify leadership and make it simple and inspiring for all of you. But let me begin with a few stories which really made me aspire to be a leader. I would say 3 words. Sorry, I thought somebody was trying to speak. Yeah, I would say 3 words to really describe how Swami has helped me. First is science, second is service, and third is spirituality. And let me tell you a bit of story on all the 3, and then I'll tell you about leadership. So from a very young age, I really wanted to pursue computer science. I wanted to be a computer science engineer and I wanted to work in the field of technology. But there were 2 obstacles. Number 1, we did not have enough money to fund my education. Number 2, there are no role models in the family. We have not had a woman engineer in the family as well. So definitely it was a little difficult to even comprehend, can I be one? Can I go out of Hyderabad? Can I study somewhere as well? But you won't believe, from the 10th grade to my education expenses in intermediate and all the 4 years, it was difficult for my father to really afford my education in BITS Pilani Computer Science. But other than deep prayer to Swami and my intent to become a computer science engineer and my intent to do something good to the world, there was nothing else with me. But that prayer really worked for me. And it is, I mean, if I tell all those stories, it'll take 3 hours also. But every semester I have to pay 5,000 rupees. And every semester was hard for me and my father to find that money. But miraculously, donors showed up. It could be in the family, friends, sometimes even like people who are generally donors. For example, Pullareddy Sweets uncle, suddenly gave us 5,000 rupees so I can pay. And all of this happened because of my sincere prayer and devotion. And that's how I became a student of science, and rest is history. After I've become computer science student, I really had a
We
chance.
seem to have lost her. Let's wait.
No, I'm here only.
Or is it only for me?
I'm here only, Anaya.
Is there a technical issue?
No, Sairam, sister is with us. We are able to see.
Yeah, I'm able to see everybody and hear everybody.
Yeah, ma'am, please continue. I think sir is having problem.
Okay, so maybe one of you can inform Gopanaya.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the story of my science. How I think to be like, my sincere prayer and devotion, Swami helped me in my desire to be an engineer. Then when I got my first job, and then when I went back to my donors, who really I helped me become, and I wanted to give them back the money, almost everybody said, beta, give the same money back to somebody who's in need. And then since that day, it has become part of my life that whatever I earn, it's important that you uplift others around you as well. And that's when I was in Puttaparthi once praying, and then I was really asking Swami, can you please guide me in my next few years of life? And then it was very clear that in the next few years of life, it is through service which I will enjoy. And that's the first time I really thought, when so many people have donated money, have served me to become an engineer, to like, otherwise I would have remained an ordinary girl doing nothing. Like Gopanaya said, I was able to do some extraordinary things because of that blessing and because of the ability. And so I felt it is also my responsibility to serve others, to really help people in need. It could be education, it could be money, it could be health or anything. So that's how Swami helped to be in the path of service. And just in that one session in Puttaparthi, where I really felt his discourse helped me connect me to service. So that's about service. And then at a very young age, at the age of 13, I started attending Swami's bhajans. My association with Swami began because of my cousins, Gopanaya's wife, and their brothers and family. And since then, I was always fascinated because my atta and her entire family, they would always be happy. They'll be joyful. On Thursday, they're looking forward to bhajans. On Sunday, they're thinking about Annadanam. So they're constantly in that happy, disciplined life as well. And that really intrigued me. That's when I started bhajans. And then later on, even when I went to Vitspilani, everybody on a Saturday night, a college student, is always trying to think, okay, can I go party? Can I go hang around with friends? Can I go do this? I was probably one of an outlier who every Saturday evening would go to a Swami bhajan. It used to happen in a professor's house. Then after the bhajan, I would go to Saraswati temple and then finish that 1.5 hour of like routine. And then, of course, join my friends and then have fun with them. So I think that really Swami taught me the lesson that if I really want to be sincere in my journey of spirituality and seeking truth and being in service and loving everybody, then you also have to make it a priority. It is so easy to get lured by every other priorities in life. So, which is why science, service, and spirituality have been foundational in my life, probably since the time I was a teenager. Now, that's a good segue. I tell you these stories because not everybody has to have a similar stories and everything. But in my life, because science, service, and spirituality had made a significant impact at a very young age, I actually use them a lot, even in leadership. Today, I am a VP at Google, and this is the first time a woman has become a VP at Google in the last 20 years in Google India, I mean. And I consider that this leadership journey would not have been possible if not an inspiration in this leadership journey. For me, that inspiration was all the spiritual teachings and the ability to serve and inspire others. And that was all through Swami for me. So, first, let me start with this topic of everybody thinks to succeed, you need high IQ. Are you very intellectual? Like, are you extremely smart? But hand on my heart, I have to say, a lot of my success, a lot of what accolades I have released or got in my life have all been because of, I'm not saying I don't have IQ, but I feel my IQ as normal as anybody. But I really think my value system and my spiritual intelligence was much higher. Like when you have emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence, your ability to lead also become extremely stronger. And if you're asking what is the connection between both of them, now let's start with that. Like, how did values and spiritual intelligence help me in my leadership journey? I think the first thing is there is a difference between managing people and leading people. I never manage people, I always lead people. So for me, like, managing itself feels like you're in control of somebody or you're telling somebody what to do as well. For me, leading is all about inspiration and serving. When I first became a manager, or after manager, I became manager of managers and then a leader. In my entire journey, there has only been one purpose, and that purpose is, how do I serve the people around me? How do I serve the people in my team? How do I serve my peers? And how do I serve this organization and customers to be successful? That is why, through science, I really understood what is the IQ you need for problem solving, for problem framing, for things to solve. Through service, it really inspired me that leadership is not about managing people, it is about leading people with inspiration, leading people with vision. So that's the first takeaway I do want to remember. I do want you all to remember, because in my case, it happened because Swami continuously inspired me that, and for me, work is worship. That many people ask me that you have two kids and then you're passionate about so many social volunteering things, and then you do such a demanding job at work. You know, when work is worship and when you take up anything thinking this is my opportunity to serve people, any role, any manager role, anything gets very exciting. And you're also, like, you have that ability to say constantly, I'm here to really transform the world, to make a difference, to create value, to create impact. With that zeal, when I wake up every day, then you have enthusiasm in everything you do, whether I'm doing a work or whether I'm raising my kids or whether I'm doing social activities. Now, why is value based leadership important? Several of you, I'm very sure, are future leaders, not just for this country. I really hope you're all leaders for the world and you're all going to leave a history and create a legacy for the mankind around you with your leadership. But the second thing I want to leave you with, which I think Swami has taught me throughout in my life, and I attended a lot of his discourses, read a lot of his books. One thing is very common in what Swami tried to tell me, it's about values. How you operate as a manager and as a leader, what value system are you driven with, is what makes people follow you, is what make your teams look up to you as a leader. There are many values many people have, but I will tell you the values I have learned through my journey with Swami. Number one is integrity. Whether people are watching you or whether people are not watching you, your integrity makes all the difference. When you are conscious and you are always doing the right thing, there is a difference between being right, doing the things right, and doing the right thing. I always suggest you, that's what I've learned from Swami, is doing the right thing. Doing things right, many people will do, but doing right thing requires integrity. And I think the second one is humility. I think there are so many opportunities I've learned throughout. Swami is probably one of the most learned I have seen in my entire life. But the humility with which I have seen him work with the entire mankind, and I'm like, if he can be like that, imagine how everybody else should be. So that's where I have learned how humility is very important as a leader. Like, when you show people you're humble, you're here to really make them successful, you're here to learn from them, that humility makes a difference. And third is a sense of giving. If you take a manager role thinking, oh, you know what, I'm going to decide everything, I have the power, I have the control, I mean, then please don't be in the manager roles. If you are coming to say that, what is it I'm doing to my team? What is it I am helping them to unblock their obstacles so that we go and drive these goals and these vision. So if you don't think day in and day out that you are in service of your team, and that is, if you're not like that, then I don't think as a manager you will ever be successful. And that I have seen, my learning is I've seen Swami drive so many transformational projects, from empowering women to teaching values to kids to what he has done to really make the villages like extremely successful with all the facilities. Like, as you know, the Maslow's rule, right? That's one thing I've learned from Swami's teachings. Maslow's hierarchy is important. Help people get the fundamental things like food and health and shelter and basic amenities before you even teach them like values or like, how do you be spiritual or how do you serve others as well. So same Maslow's theory is also important for you as leaders when you manage your teams. Understand their fundamental needs. And then when you understand and when you think you are in service of them, then you'll understand. You'll take time to step back and think, okay, what is it the individual on your team wants? Do they need financial help? Do they want to grow in their careers? Do they want to do complex projects? Do they want to solve like a bigger problems? What is it? When you understand it, you are in service of people. And fourth important value as a manager is gratitude. When people do great job, it is very important as a manager for you to really appreciate what they are doing so that they feel more energized, more valued as well. Last important value for me, there are many more, but I try to operate a lot with these five, is trust. When you trust people, when others trust you and you build a bridge of trust, there are so many things you can accomplish. So these five values, at least for me, have been the guiding light as a manager or leader in the last 20 years. In this forum, I can absolutely say with a lot of vulnerability that what a lot of books and my academic curriculum and everything could not teach me about leadership, I learned it through Swami's teachings. I learned it through just observing Swami about how his avatar has really transformed. And that really comes to my next point on, I want to give you a few examples on what did I learn and how did I utilize. See, when you become a manager, most people think that, okay, I come to work, I have 5 to 8 people or 10 people reporting to me. I am in charge of everything. I'm going to deliver on a project and I'm going to do all of this, which is great. But your job is also not to control, is to enable. So move from controller to enabler. But every day you don't come to work and you find everything seamless. There are a lot of issues. There are a few things which people may have issues, technology may have issues, customer may have issues, domain may have issues. How do you ensure as managers you stay calm? How do you ensure as leaders you stay calm? Today, that's the topic I really want to go deeper, which is how do you lead in complexity and how do you lead in crisis? And I'll take a few examples recently, right? I think COVID and work from home has probably been one of the biggest crises human history has seen in the last few years or probably even decades as well. And apart from that, that's in India. But if I'm a global leader in IT, I manage a team of close to 5,000 vendors and 200 full timers, and we have teams in 10 countries and 4 continents. So, as a global leader, I have seen crisis in every part of the world. Right now, what is going on? The invasion of Ukraine to wildfires in Colorado to some shooting things happening in America. There are so many crises around. So whenever there are complexities which come, whenever there are crises which come to you as a leader, how do you handle it? There are two options, right? You can get jittery, you can get rattled, and you will absolutely work in chaos and you make things more chaotic. Or you step back and then you think, what do you do as a manager and a leader during crisis and complexity? And I don't know about any other courses you have done. No course, nothing has ever taught me how do you lead in crisis and how do you lead in complexity. I'm going to tell you about 10 learnings, and all my learnings have come from Swami's teachings. Because those are the teachings which constantly help me play that role. And one of the reason people ask me many a times, Madhuri, how do you stay calm during crisis, or how do you stay calm during complexity? And I really attribute it to my practices and to my belief in the universe and divine and a guru like Swami as well. And I say that because it's a thing you have to develop over time. Overnight, none of us will become a saint or will become like very calm and composed as well. But to develop that, you have to do some practices. For example, because of attending bhajans for so many years, like even just today from 7:21 we have been playing bhajans, right? It hardly requires 60 seconds of listening to a Swami's bhajan to be centered, to get into a blissful mode. And then I'm absolutely in the moment many a times. And I have, by the way, a lot of back-to-back meetings all the time at work. I start my day at 6:30. I'm getting my kids ready. I'm sending them to school. Then I'm going to work. I have meetings starting at 8:30. My meetings end at 4:30. Then I'm coming to home. I'm cooking and I'm helping kids with the homework, or like, giving them dinner. And then again, I have meetings at 8:30 in the night, or then in the weekends, I have some activities. So many people keep asking me, how do you manage your time? I said, I only manage my energy, because my energy, you have physical, emotional, social, but I thrive on spiritual energy, which is, I always think, what is it I can do broader than myself as well? And when those energies come together is when you are able to do it. It's the same thing for me even in crisis. In crisis, it doesn't need more than 60 seconds or maybe 1 to 5 minutes for me to step back and calm down and think, what do you do? Now, let me tell you my learnings of leading a crisis. I think the first thing is, as a leader, you have to focus on what matters. So, as a leader, there are so many things going on at any point of time. And we have seen unprecedented crisis in the past world. Almost every individual, every country, every organization had to go through crisis one way or the other. And whenever crisis arises in an organization, the first thing people look to is a leader, the person whom they believe will solve the problems and take the necessary steps. See, not everyone is an expert at handling crisis situation. It requires extremely strong leadership. The reason today I chose this topic is, the world may have many crises and a lot of complex problems we may be solving. But if you're all equipped with leading in crisis and leading in complexity, you can do anything easily as well. So today I want to leave you with a few techniques. First thing, like I said, is focus on what matters. As a leader, it is very critical to start thinking out of all the things happening. What are the things I can control? And what are the things I can influence? And what are the things I cannot control? This is an important framework I learned through Swami's leadership teachings. And use this in every aspect of your life, not only leadership. What can you control? What can you influence? What can you not control? What you cannot control is, you cannot end the virus. What you can control is, what are you doing in those things as well, in that specific moments of time as well. Second, if you're all wondering, like, what are the ways, it's very difficult to explain in a tangible way, like, how does Swami help me in the day-to-day basis in my leadership? But I really urge you to listen whatever I'm saying from now onwards with your heart, not with your mind, because only if you listen with your heart, you will really realize, in times of crisis, both in my personal and professional life, how did Swami help me? I think one of my first learning in crisis is, you are not alone. Like, it is not me alone who's dealing with this crisis, whether it's personal or professional. The universe is conspiring. Swami is always there. He's always helping me and guiding me. But how do I receive that? So I will tell you my techniques on how I really ensure that he's guiding me whenever I'm in these things as well. First, I do want to tell you one of my personal crisis stories. There are several personal crises, but one crisis which happened probably about 25 years ago or so is, my father was definitely struggling life and death in the hospital. And the doctor did come back and say that, look, I don't think he will live beyond another 3-4 hours. And that was a shock. I'm a 22-year-old girl. I have no money to even pay the hospital fee. I just started working. And this doctor is telling me, I didn't know what to do. And then, because we didn't have enough money, many relatives were even wondering to even call me or come to me, because they think I may ask money for the hospital or something else as well. And then I think the person who gave me advice at that time was Gopanaya. He said, Beta, Nana, enduku, why can't you write a letter to Swami? I said, Annaya, where do I post the letter? He said, just write it with all your heart and then we'll figure out everything. And that day I sat down in that hospital ICU lobby and I wrote a letter with deep devotion and passion. And I've written everything to Swami on why my father should live for the next 20 years, because he worked so hard. Like I told you my story, right? With all the donors and everything, he worked hard. I just started working. I'm not married. He's not seen my life. So I really want him to see the girl who he has educated for so many years. What wonders can she do in her life as well? And then of course I didn't know where to post, right? There is nothing. So I didn't write postal address, nothing. I just sealed it and I just gave it, and I think we just dropped it in the next post box without. And it is a miracle that in the next 1 hour the doctors came and said, look, I think he's recovering. We are taking him to back to the operation theater, and I think he will. And rest is history. This is like, more than 24 years ago, and we will be celebrating my father's 74th birthday in the next few weeks as well. So that was my first learning, that in the moment of crisis, you have to stay calm and you have to trust and you have to believe in the power of Guru and the power of. See, in my case, he was my Guru, but for those of you, whether you have Guru, whether you believe in a divine power or universe, you're not alone in a crisis. It will help you as well. Now, let's come to a professional crisis, right? The professional crisis was when March 2020, the COVID crisis hit. We had to move several of our employees to work from home. A lot of our operations had to be managed. We needed a business continuity planning. And March 2021, the second wave was starting. We had so many tragedies around that. In all of that, those were of some few lessons then I have learned through in working is, first thing is, how do you listen actively? See, many a times I've always felt that for every crisis and problem I'm going through, there is an answer. But Swami will send the answer to me through someone or the other. So in my case, I have learned that when I am in a crisis, the answer will come. It will either come from within me, it will come from people around me, but I have to listen. And that's the learning I have, which is when you're taking on a leadership role in crisis, that does not mean that one person is the sole advisor of anything. Listening is any leader's greatest strength. Let's listen to others' advice, listen to all the inputs, because there are people with experiences who have managed difficult situations. Then address the blind spots, then you broaden all the perspectives and then see. Because that's the time you don't know in what form it is coming. And I have so many stories where I did not know the answer when I started with, but when I'm aware that the answer will come and I have to keenly listen, that's when it is. So, first thing I told you, focus on what matters. Second thing is listen with awareness. The answer will come through. I think the third thing I've learned is in complex and crisis times, you expect the unexpected, because there is left field things playing from everywhere. You have to see what are different opportunities and challenges. So you be open minded to search within these adverse circumstances, what is it you can do beyond the obvious? Because at that time you're rattled, you cannot think anything, but don't give up. Like unexpected things will keep happening every hour or every day. And instead of more sulking about the adversity, you keep your North Star as your vision. You reset strategy regularly and focus on few things, and then start thinking in this uncertainty, what is the next immediate thing I can do for the next few hours? And then with that data, we can think about what do I do. But when crisis hits, don't start thinking, oh, you know what, I want everything to be normal. It will never be normal. There is nothing like normal in crisis situations. I think my fourth learning is you have to step back to look forward. And this whole stepping back, in corporate, we have a word called having a balcony moment, which is, if you go to your, like if you're watching an opera show and if you're going to a balcony, you have a larger view of the entire opera or the entire theater as well. And same with even theaters as well. It is the same thing in life, both in happy situations and in crisis situations as well, which is, if you can learn to step back and then start thinking about what are your experiences and expertise to look at the bigger picture, understand all the moving parts together, because only when you step back, your underlying causes become very clear. And that's when you can easily assess what are the next steps. But so many people struggle with this simple thing of how do you step back and how do you have a balcony moment. For me, I mean, everybody has different experiences, but for me, that experiences have come because of there are two things I've done regularly in the last 25 plus years. One is singing Swami's bhajans, and two is taking time to sit and meditate, either gratitude meditation or a few other meditation techniques as well. You have to train your mind and body to learn to step back, not do knee jerk things, not just act with bias all the time, but to, I always say, bias to thoughtful action is important, not bias to action. You see a problem and you start fixing it as well. But for that, I absolutely attribute to these two things. Like I have gained over years. By the way, it's a continuous journey. Even now, if I stop doing my practices, I will become jittery again. So it's important to constantly for me to start doing it. And that is absolute my second nature now. My second nature is learn to step back and then look forward. I'm trying to give you a few words so that it's easier for you to remember balcony moments, step back, look forward, because these become easy for you tomorrow when you work as a managers as well. The next important thing, this is something I have fundamentally believed, I think since I was a teenager, which is always respond and not react to situations. Now, whether this is crisis situation or any situation, let's say your employee comes to you and say, hey, I don't like the way you have assigned the projects, or I don't like the rating you have given it to me. The reaction could be, what are you talking? I have thought through everything and I've really given you the right rating. I don't think you understand properly. That is a way of reaction. Response is just ask them, can you please tell me more about it? I want to hear more context. I want to hear your perspective. So when you respond to situations and when you don't react to situations, then people know that you have a sense of control over the situation. And when you have a sense of the control of the situation, in a normal situation, let's say it's your one-on-one with your direct reports, you keep the other person calm. The other person doesn't feel threatened. The other person wants to open up and talk. In the crisis time, when you respond and you're not constantly reacting with power or anger, and you automatically keep everyone calm and focused. And the moment you keep others calm and focused, as a leader, you're one of the most effective leader in solving the problem. I think the next thing, and this is where I have many stories where Swami helps me, is make decisions. As a leader, it's better to make decisions. Let's say you make 10 decisions, 3 or 4 of them may be bad decisions, but it's better to make decisions and have some of them be wrong rather than trying to make the perfect decision and never make a decision. Because your job as a manager and a leader is to make decisions regularly. And I make so many decisions in my personal and professional life. Specifically, some of them cost a lot if you don't make the right decisions. So one of the biggest challenge I have seen a manager and a leader has to do is sometimes you have to make decisions without having all the information. And that's why I said, how do you develop that ability? Like, sometimes when I have all the data and then it is much easier to make a decision. But when I don't have all the data, I'm constantly sitting and wonder. I used to constantly sit and wonder, what is the right decision to make here? For me, I will tell you my technique, but there are many other techniques as well. And some of the decisions I make are very complex. So they can reorganize the entire org structure, or it really has an impact on the customer CSAT, or it can, my volumes can be different. My OPEX numbers can go up or down. So these are some big decisions for the customers, for the company, and for your own people as well. So my decision-making strategy always is, I really put pros and cons of everything going on. And then I really take time to think through some of those and then start thinking about what are different ways for us these decisions can play out as well. And initially, I'll be honest, this is my 25th year of career. In the first 5-6 years, I used to struggle because I have the zeal of Madhuri has to make the best decisions always. And I wanted to be a perfectionist always, which means I have to make perfect decisions. I have to do everything. That's where, again, I think one day, I think I was just sitting and singing something. And a lot of times it's ironic that when I want to make a decision and when I'm not like jittery and everything, and that's when either when I sing to myself or when I'm just closing my eyes and constantly observing the thoughts which are coming. My meditation technique many a times is close your eyes and let the thoughts pass away and just keep observing the thoughts. I don't know, I should call it a miracle or whether I should just call it it's a way of life that Guru helps you. Is when I sit down and when I calmly either sing or when I do my meditations, a lot of times all the thoughts keep passing on, and suddenly there'll be a light bulb moment and said, okay, this is what it is. Now you can call it a divine intervention, you can call it your own things playing within you, but it happens. So when you're making a decision, you figure out your techniques, right? I don't need more than 5-10 minutes to make critical decisions, because all I have to do is sit back, think through. I don't make any decisions in a hurry because 24 hours are not going to make a difference unless it is a life and death situation or unless it is the crisis is so important. But thinking through. So my ask to you is make decisions, but also develop practices on what are your ways to calm down, remove the clutter from your mind, and then start making decisions as well. Like for me, I mean, it might sound like a child thing for you. Like there are 2-3 bhajans which are very, very dear to my heart as well. And especially when I'm going through any personal thing, just sitting and even singing Daya karo, Kripa karo, Raksha karo, Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Ek Naam, Sundar Naam. Just sitting and singing this bhajan for a few seconds absolutely gives me the trust and calms down my emotions, gives me all the strength that there will be a decision, but I have to sit and observe my thoughts and something will come up. And similarly, let's say it's a professional decision and there is a conflict. Let's say I'm in a room, 3 of the leaders, we have very different opinions, there is a conflict, and we don't fight in the rooms, meeting rooms, but I'm sure we have different, very strong opinions and assertive ways of doing a lot of things as well. There are days, of course, I get like frustrated, or I'm like, why is this decision not happening? This is very important, and things like that. On such days, many a times I come back and sing this bhajan for myself, which is Bala Gopal Jai Jai Sai Ram, प्रेम भरा दिल में हमारे साई राम. This one line of प्रेम भरो दिल में हमारे साई राम, it every time I sing it, because at the end of the day in any professional environment, my job is to only be empathetic to others. If somebody has a conflicting opinion, it's good. That doesn't mean I should get frustrated. It means I have to listen to different points of view. So, and similarly, like I said, singing something and then sitting for a few minutes really helps me understand. Whatever is it, some people run, some people probably do photography, some people probably take a walk in the parks. There are so many things it is. But for me, these are my ways of, because of my association with Swami, it helps me so that you make the right decisions always, and making right decisions is important. Then the next thing is you have to show confidence and hope. If, like I said, most of the times people are looking up to you as managers and leaders. So the leaders need to show confidence. It's your job to determine the nuances of a situation and convey a sense of confidence to your teams all the time. When people feel confident that my leader is honest, my leader is empathetic, my leader is transparent, my leader is thoughtful, my leader is realistic, I can guarantee you they have the belief and confidence that you will do the right things for them. But whose job it is to instill? It is your job as a leader to instill that confidence and hope in them that you will take care of the situations. And I think the last advice I will give you, especially in the crisis and complex situations, is before you lead in a crisis, you have to know how to manage and dissolve your own stress. Leaders go through their own stress. So be vulnerable. Sometimes sometimes if you're going through, like when the second wave was going on and I'm really trying to work on the business continuity plan and the operations, it used to be difficult hearing stories in the meeting for me where people are losing their loved ones. So there are days I really had to say how emotionally I'm feeling sad for the loss of those lives as well. But I mean, I've worked for a leader in several years, but in wave two, I really felt impacted seeing so many tragedies. And at the end of the day, how do you still run your operations and keep your customers going as well? And that's when I also learned that I had to do a lot more of my practices to really like it's lot more pranayama, lot more breathing techniques, lot more singing so that it really helps me calm down. But the first thing is as a leader, you must be aware of your own stress. You have to have your own tips and tricks and techniques to address your stress. You cannot help cope up with other stress if you don't have experience in managing your own stress. If you know how to manage your stress, how to dissolve your stress, how to dissolve your anxiety every single day, then only as a manager you can come to work and you can really help them. And remember this thing, no one has ever solved a problem or has ever solved a crisis by worrying about it all the time or venting about it. I mean, I am anti venting, anti gossip. And these things, that's because of what Swami's teachings and discourses throughout. I mean, I can put my hand on my heart. I do not gossip about my family. I don't gossip about people at work or my friends. And that's the value system Swami has inculcated. And gossip is nothing but negative. Venting is nothing but negative worrying because it constantly brings down your energy. And people will be thinking, why are all these helpful at work? But when you do the role of managers and leaders, you'll realize how all these values help. Instead, my suggestion is instead of worrying and venting and gossiping, focus your energy and start thinking positive things or important things to do to move the needle. And remember, in tough situations, do what it takes every day to really handle your stress, to make one decision at a time. That way, it will become part of the life as well. And lastly, I do want to open it up for Q&A so that we can have some engaging dialogue. But I leave you with this, which is it is in the time of complexity, challenges, and crisis, good leaders emerge. So when tough situations come your way, or a complex problems come your way, or challenges come your way, that's not the time to get worried or to get overwhelmed. That's the time to think, okay, now is the need for a good leader like me. The most important thing is every complexity, every challenge, and every crisis will pass. So at that point of time, your job, and this is one of the things I have learned over years, is don't just manage a crisis, lead the crisis, lead the complex situations. There are very, very few leaders who will lead it rather than embracing it. Don't ignore it, don't avoid it. Lead it from the front so that because each one of this is a stepping stone to change. A crisis or a complexity or a challenge is always an opportunity to take more accountability, take more responsibility, take more ownership, and do better. Because as when you graduate out of this program, I really want you to be the best world leaders and global leaders. So not just for India, but for the entire world, you should be transforming the world as a leader. You should be leading any crisis, any complexity. But the complexity and crisis is not negative. As long as we live in a world, there will be complexity, there will be chaos, there will be complications, there will be crisis. But your job is to really lead, not just embrace it or manage it, but lead it from the front. Then the world will be a much better place. So my wish for all of you is I hope this entire program which Satsai Institute has been doing will be a game changer for you, a life changer. I have confidence with just Swami's teachings. If I have come this far, I envy all that I never had a chance to attend a program like this. But if a program like this was there, I think my journey would have been even accelerated as well. So take this as an opportunity. I think I have full confidence and a lot of hope on all of you that you will be the best leaders for the future and you will really transform this world and you will leave the world a better place as a leader. With that, that, definitely I want to ensure we have some engaging dialogue. So please ask any questions you have.
Nishta, you can take over. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Nishta. You're on mute.
We can't
Not
hear you.
audible. Nishta Joshi.
I think she's trying to speak, but we can't hear her.
Yeah, I see that. Nishta? You're not able to. Okay. Oh, you log in once again. In the meantime, maybe I will ask Vidya to take over. Vidya, can you take over till Nishta comes back onto the screen once again?
Sure, Uncle Saira. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the wonderful session. So we'll open the platform for the Q&A, and I request.
Vidya, I think there are two Zoom meetings open in your thing, or maybe Madhuri is on two. There's the feedback coming in.
Okay, just a sec.
Sure. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I request Brother Velluri Sai from TS to unmute yourself and turn on your video and ask the question, please.
Sairam, Madhuri, Sairam sister. So I already know you. You also know me. So you have always been an inspiration for me ever since I met you in Shivam. But there is one question that I have on my professional front. So I'll try to explain my scenario. So I work for an IT company now, but I do want to get into a bit of management. At this point of time, I am no longer interested to work on the IT part of it. So there is a lot of demotivation, and this has been there for a couple of years already. So there has been a lot of demotivation that I have every day during my work, although for some or the other reason, I'm just not able to come out and spend some time reading about management or reading about the about everything that I want to switch to, about the job role I want to switch to. I'm somehow not able to allocate my time. I don't know, there's sort of a procrastination that is happening. I don't know what is just happening, but I'm not able to come out of it. But there is a lot of demotivation that I have, and my role in my current job has also increased. That means responsibilities have also increased. And as you said, now I might have a team myself, and it is demotivating myself for me myself. So taking up their work, their stuff, that is even more demotivating. I just get into this sense that I don't want all this. Why am I even doing this? How do I address that? Is it procrastination or?
Firstly, thank you for your kind words about me. I'm glad you brought up this point that I tell everybody, please don't be a manager until you have a purpose. If you really want to manage people, then don't be a manager. If you really want to bring a group of people together, inspire them to solve some big opportunities and lead a transformation or solve something like, turn around a few things, then be a manager, right? So in your case, I think what is probably a little contradicting each other is, on one end, I do think you want to get into the management, but on the other end, the whole thing about getting into management is demotivating with you because you're like, oh, I have to do this person's job. I'm not doing this. I have two suggestions for you, right? First is you have to go back to the drawing board, like, take a piece of paper. And I really want you to answer, why do you want to be a manager and why do you not want to be a manager? First of all, when you start writing down things, your clutter in the mind goes away. And you'll probably have 5 reasons why you want to be a manager, and you'll probably have 10 reasons why you don't want to be a manager. Then you can start looking at each of the reason and say, is this valid? Is this not valid as well? So my hypothesis is it may be 2 reasons, 2 root causes. There may be a few others. One is time. Maybe you're overwhelmed, you have too many things going on. So you may be thinking, I don't have enough time to do my current job well. How do I do all of this job well? That's one. Second is maybe unknowingly, you may also have an imposter syndrome. You may be also worrying, can I do this? Is this really possible to do as well? So I think for the second one, I hope that doesn't exist. But if that exists, I really think you need to tell yourself that nobody becomes a good manager on day one. You have to take it, you have to keep trying, you have to have good mentors, you have to have good coach. Your manager will be like, continuing to coach you. So get rid of any imposter syndrome if it exists. But if it is time issue, then you have to just learn a few time management techniques. What do you do as an IC? What do you do as a manager as well? But don't sit on that emotion of you are giving the word demotivation. But I'd really ask you to peel the onion a little bit and start writing, because when you say write down a few things, I think that is when you will start realizing what are valid fears or what are valid points and what is something your mind may be unnecessarily tricking you to believe in as well. And put a deadline. Sometimes you may think, okay, I may procrastinate this, but you can always say, look, by April 15th, I'm going to make a decision one way or the other. Sometimes you have to put some hard deadlines on you to make those decisions, like I was telling earlier as well.
I totally understand that it is the first one that I have. But what do I write on paper? What should I make me free of?
Yeah, for example, what are your top 3 reasons to be a manager?
Okay.
And when you're also writing on a paper, like you said it, the first one, right? I don't have time. Maybe that's one of the reason you don't want to be a manager. But are there other reasons you don't want to be a manager other than not having time? Is it you think I may not be able to do a lot of coding, or I may not be able to do a lot of work myself? Will I have enough learning time? There are a lot of myths, by the way, when an IC becomes a manager. And there are some really good books, really good free courses online as well on how do you make that transition. But somewhere here, you have to get rid of your own fear and your own reasons, because I just feel those reasons may not be valid. You may be stuck in an invalid reason.
That's right. That's very right.
Sairam, am I audible now?
Yes, Nishita.
Yes. Okay. So the next question is by M. Jeevan from Karnataka. Please unmute yourself.
Sairam, ma'am, thank you so much for the inspiring session. Feeling blessed to be part of it. Ma'am, I have a couple of questions and request your guidance on it. So while leading a team, how do you deal with low performance? There could be like couple of varieties of low performance, like people whom we know like they have potential, and there could be people where whose potential is not discovered yet. And the second one is like you said, like managing time for you is like kind of like managing energy. So can you shed some more light on like how do you manage your time? You must be playing various roles, like you must be leading a good team, and you must be managing your life, your family, and at the same time you might be upgrading yourself continuously. So
yeah, maybe in the interest of time, I'll share some short answers, but I'm happy to share any articles later so that they can share it with you. First is, how do you manage low performers? That's a very good question. I use 2 techniques. There are more also, but the 2 techniques, the top 2 techniques I use is, first is you have to understand, is it a skill issue or a will issue? If it is a skill issue, most people get confused between the both, right? So if it is a skill issue, then you really have to think, can this person learn the skill? Or is this person better off doing something else, right? You have to give them time. You have to give them a good coach. You have to help them learn the skill. First, identify what is that skill the person is not able to learn or demonstrate, and because of which I think they're a low performer. Sometimes they have potential, they have the skill, but they may not have the will. And then you'll have to think about, why do they not have the will? Is it because they're not motivated in this job? Is it because they don't have the right incentives, or is it because some conflicts are happening? So first understand, is it skill or will, and what are the reasons, and can we help them on those? Second, I would recommend this book called First Break All the Rules. What do world's best managers do differently? And the author gives an example of a drama. Like if you're directing a theater play or a drama, and you have 10 characters, you choose choose different characters, right? Who's the hero, who's the heroine, who's the villain, who's the comedian, and all of that. How do you choose? You choose based on what the character needs and what the person has a skill, right? For example, I suck at humor. I'm like very bad. I don't have good humor. And if you take me and put it in a comedian role, I'm never going to entertain the audience really well. It's the same thing. The second issue, sometimes people not perform well is because they're in a wrong job. What they and what they are is probably not matching at all. So maybe are we casting the right person in the right role is an important thing for us to understand as well. And when we do low performers, right? One thing and this again is back to the respect and empathy and value system I was talking about. Don't bring down their confidence. And this is a message to everybody as well. When you're dealing with low performers, be objective. Don't brand that person as, you know what, you're not able to do this job at all, right? We are nobody to tell somebody. You can absolutely be specific. Hey, these were your goals. You have not delivered on this goal. This is not happening because, let's say, you are struggling with collaboration or you're struggling with problem solving. Don't generalize the person. The person may be not performing in this role, but that doesn't make their brand as a bad performer, right? And it's important to say, hey, maybe I always choose the words and say, I think you're struggling in this role. Here are the 5 reasons you're struggling. Maybe you will probably do better off. I have known many people who have probably got a bad rating in one role and they've really thrived in a different role as well. So those are the techniques to use. Now, coming to a second question, it's a long answer. There are so many things, but I'll tell you, for me, the difference between we all have 24 hours in a day, and assuming we all sleep at least 8 hours a day, you have 16 hours. See, at any particular time, I feel if my energy is high, then the same half an hour I'm able to do better projects, better decisions, or better. Similarly, if I'm exhausted, that's why there are 4 kinds of energy, right? You can be physically exhausted, like you have a pain or you have a headache or you just body is tired, or emotionally you're exhausted. Maybe something is not going well with your friends or with your family, and then that emotions, you're sad or angry, and that's emotionally brings you down. Or mentally, maybe there's too much going on and your mental energy is not so high as well. Social energy may not be high. You may just have had a tiff with your friend or somebody as well. So that's why energy is important, right? It's if you ensure that you take care of your physical, mental, emotional energies, then at that point of time, now imagine 1 hour when you're dealing with bad emotions, but you're still trying to work, versus you take 10 minutes to fix your energy and then use 40 minutes to do your job. Or if you can't do it, don't do it at that time. So for me, I ensure that in my high energy time, I work. When I don't have the right energy, I actually figure out what do I do, or I do things which doesn't need so much of your thinking power, right? It may be something small as well. So one is, that's how I manage. Like, second is, I'm very organized with my time because I have no choice. I have 2 kids and I have passions. So if I really want to sing and learn music every weekend, if I want to do social activities, I definitely allocate time and say, okay, that doesn't mean everything is easy to follow. Things will change, right? But at least I be structured in my calendar and say, here's what I'm going to do. I plan it. And then I constantly think about how do I adjust as well. Last, I use this Eisenhower matrix and rock, pebble, sand theory a lot for time management. Eisenhower matrix is very helpful for me, which is what do you do now? What do you do later? What do you delegate? And what do you delete? Most people start from, well, let me do everything. And then half time later, you'll realize, oh, I should not have done it. Should I have done it later? Should I have deleted? Start the other way. If anything comes on your plate, first thing, should I delete it? Should this even be done? If this has to be done, then think, is there a better person to do this job? Then delegate it. If not, then, okay, should I do it now or can I do it 1 hour later, 1 day later? If it says, no, you have to do it right now, and that's what your mind tells you, then do it now. But most people don't follow this process. It only takes a few minutes. But if you're jumping at first in and first out, then your life is not controlled by you. And then if everything happening is urgent in your life, then that means something is not working very well. Second, I use rock, pebble, sand, water analogy. If your time is if your time is a glass jar, and my philosophy is first fill it with big rocks. Big rocks are your big priorities, both in your personal and professional life. Then put pebbles. Pebbles are your important, urgent priorities and things like that. Then you put sand. Sand are these small, small tasks which you need to know. I have to review a document, or I have to leave some comment, I have to respond to this email, or I have to just put the dishes on time and things like that. Water, of course, are like, things which are day-to-day things happening. But if in a jar you put big rocks first and then pebbles and then sand and then water, there's so much a jar can take, versus try the other way. If you put all the water and then put sand and then put pebbles and then put big rocks, it won't fit. And then you feel overwhelmed. Water is overflowing, sand is overflowing. That's exactly how our life is also. So these are a few techniques I diligently use to manage my time and energy.
Thank you, ma'am. So very much helpful. Thank you.
We will take questions for 10 more minutes. So brothers and sisters, keep your questions short and please no follow-up questions, okay? The next question is from Aditi from, Aditi, VS Aditi. Please unmute.
Sairam ma'am, truly blessed to be a part of this week. Thank you so much for inspiring talk. Ma'am, my question is more on the individual level. It's about procrastination. For example, in case of an adverse situation or a crisis, like your mind sometimes tend to, choose the easiest way out, like more like an escapism. And you try to think, okay,
sorry, in the case of what situation?
In case of an adverse situation or a crisis,
yeah,
your mind sometimes just wants to block away from all of it, and it tries to think of finding the most easier way out. So at that time, you just try to block out from the situation and try to distract yourself on something else. You probably start watching some sitcom or some show, thinking that, okay, for some time, let me just stay away. And you tend to get into that loop for some time, and you keep pushing that situation till the last deadline, such that once you're reaching the deadline, you just get so stressed out and you just try to do some work. You just try to get it done in a very haphazard and hurried manner, rather than enjoying the process and doing things in a more calm way. Like this procrastination, initially it started something very small, but it tends to put you inside a loop and it keeps growing and growing. So, like, how do we overcome this?
Yeah, no, excellent question. I'll tell you 2-3 techniques I follow, but before that, see, the fact that you have identified this, that is itself good. So that means you have awareness that sometimes I'm procrastinating things rather than taking it head on, or like, solving it as well. And I think typically when adverse situations happen, people either avoid it or ignore it, or you fight, or you flight, or you freeze. Freeze is, I don't know what to do. Flight is you run away and you think, okay, let me just watch a TV show or something. Or you are absolutely becoming angry and you're fighting in the moment, right? All those three doesn't help, because all those three are reactions. Responding is like, you definitely have to take some time to think through, what do I do? But then if you're avoiding, or if you're absolutely like, don't want to do it, then you don't want to get through it as well. See, like taking some initial time to be thoughtful is an important thing. But usually that time shouldn't be more than few hours, or at max a day. After that also, if you see yourself doing it, then it's important to walk through that and do that. Right now, how do you do that? That's where I'll tell you 1 or 2 of my techniques as well. First thing is, it comes from experience. See, once or twice, you have to walk through the fears. You have to walk through your adverse situations to know that it's not that hard. Like for me, for example, in my personal life, if my dad used to think, why do I have to do so many donations, so many debts to, help this girl study? I could just send her to some local thing. I'm sure everybody discouraged him. Like, why are you doing this? Get her married and all of that. But he decided to walk through, and I also had my fear. But when we did it once or twice, then I realized it's not, of course it feels painful, but it is not hard. Like if you have to, that's why when you keep your focus on your North Star and your overall goal and vision, right? Then you will motivate yourself and say, let me try it. So when you try once or twice, you realize it's not that hard. Similarly, I think, like, when my dad was unwell or I had some health issues, which I went through later. In the personal situation also, I was also not courageous like this, by the way. 24 years ago, I was a very shy girl, or I would be a little hesitant to do some complex things as well. But over the years, only when you do it once, twice, thrice, you will realize that you're doing a complex thing. So, my first suggestion and technique is pick one or two low complexity things and try it so that even if you fail, there's nothing much to lose as well. Dealing with adversity, you cannot build overnight. So, when things are not adverse, try one or two things as well. And of course, if things are adverse and you really need to do and you're avoiding it, then my second technique is I call somebody who can instill courage in me. It could be a friend, family, colleague, or somebody, because they're like, yeah, absolutely do these two, three things. This is a plan B. Don't worry. Because you trust them, then you go do it. And then when you do these two techniques again and again, it becomes your second nature to face it. And one truth I've learned, I wish I learned it young in my life, is I always used to think fearlessness means absence of courage. But sorry, absence of fear. I always felt fearlessness means absence of fear. There is no fear. But that's not true. Fearlessness means you have the presence of courage to face your fear. So the day I learned it, right, all I had to do was get your courage, face your fear, then you become fearless. Again, fear will come again. I always used to think that people who are courageous means they have no fears at all. I don't think any human being lives like that. They may be faking if they are saying it. So you try some of these things and try the low risk ones first, or try to take help with some people. Then it absolutely will become your second nature. There will be butterflies in the stomach when you do it for the first, second time, but it's not life and death. So you have to take it on and then try it.
Thank you so much.
Shekhar from Sikkim.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable time. And I have a simple question. While putting your energy and time, your team might not get the expectation you keep from your team, and how you will motivate yourself while leading a team that time.
Sorry, when you're leading, your team may not get the best decision, you said?
Expectation, what you want from team, but you're not getting these things from your team. At that time, how you will motivate yourself?
Yeah.
They don't meet your expectations.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, that is a brilliant question. Thank you so much for asking that question. So, first thing is, it's easy for a manager and a leader to think my team is not meeting my expectations. But first of all, if your team is not meeting your expectations, you have to do two things before. One is, are the expectations clear to them? So the first thing I do is call for, we have regular team meetings, right? I ask them, hey, I see we are falling short of expectations. I just want to clarify if the expectations are clear. So I do it in my one-on-ones, I do it in my team meeting to ensure that they are clear of expectations. Sometimes I see that once they are very clear, they actually perform really well. Second is, let's assume they had clarity and yet we are falling short of expectations. Then I ask them, hey, what is it which is falling short? Sometimes many people hesitate to ask for help. They think if they ask for help, your manager or your peers will look at you're not competent. So the second thing I tell them is, can I help you in any way? Is there any obstacles I can remove as well? And I think the third thing is to regularly review, right? Like, when you said, don't go back and then start thinking about, what it's too late. You have to do it in a more dynamic and real time way. Then your question is, how do I motivate myself when the team is not delivering up to expectations? First thing is, I don't get angry. I don't get frustrated, but definitely I am concerned, right? Because at the end of the day, we have committed something to our customers, to our organization. We have to do it as well. The way I motivate myself is, there is a situation at work. I really have to understand what are the root causes. If the root cause is a person, then I will give the feedback to that person. But if the root cause is a lack of understanding and clarity, then it is my job as a leader to provide clarity. Majority of the times, I don't assume that it is a fault of my team. Because if you don't assume that, then I think you're approaching in a more listening way, you're being more humble. But once I know that it is an issue with an individual or with a few individuals, then I give them feedback. Once I know it's an issue with the process or it's an issue with my communication, then I fix it. So those are the ways I motivate. The second thing is, you have to be a little ahead of curve. Like, if any manager or leader does this in the last minute and say, oh, you know what, tomorrow is the deadline and today we are not meeting expectations, then I think the issue is with me, not with my team. So the other way I motivate myself is, every Monday I start thinking, what are the important deliverables this week? Are we ahead of it? Are we on time? If not, I write the right emails, I ask the right questions in the reviews and things like that, because that's another way I motivate myself, so that I don't wait till the last minute. So before that, having said all of this, things sometimes go wrong in the last minute. When they go wrong, I don't believe as a manager, when something goes wrong, it is your team's fault. When something goes right, it is yours. Whether it goes right or not, we have to hold ourselves as a team as well. So that's why I'm like, if I've signed up as a manager, then of course, if we don't deliver it as per expectations, it's my job to understand the root cause and then fix it, whether it's my side or their side.
So you don't skill and kill here.
Yes.
We'll take one more question. Adishri from Maharashtra.
Is she there?
Sairam, am I audible?
Yes.
We can't see you. Okay.
So actually, I wanted to ask you one question, like if you are put in leading something and you are totally new to it, like you yourself need to first attain some knowledge of it and understand the process which you will be putting your team through. So I just wanted to ask, you should focus on yourself first, or just think about your team first?
Yeah, very, very good question. And this happens very often. By the way, I have recently, there are two situations like that in what you said, right? One situation is what happened to me recently. I got into a new role on July 1st, but it is 5 different teams have come together. So teams know what they're doing, but it is for me to understand, because some teams were with me, some teams were with somebody else. And when they came to me, I don't know much about those teams. So in that case, it is my job to go deeper, to do deep dive sessions, to do shadow sessions, to do learning immersion sessions. I host all of this. Whenever I take a new role, I do a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Typically, I use a framework of 30, 60, 90 people, product, process. What should I learn about people? What should I learn about processes? What should I learn about the product? And then what is the vision? What are the goals? What am I doing in 30, 60, 90? That 90-day plan is very critical whenever you take on a new role, right? But in this case, my team members are there. They're happy to give me and onboard me. But sometimes, as you said, it may be a brand new project. Let's say if it was done through something else, or a new customer has come, it's a brand new project for all of us as well. There are 2-3 ways to approach this. One is, certain learning can be done by everything together. If, for example, we are learning more about the product, or we are learning more about what is the customer issue or challenge we are trying to solve, then it could be a group session together. But second, as a leader, of course, like, it is your job to first set the vision, set the goals. What is the problem we are trying to solve? What are the opportunities you're going to run? So such things you have to be ahead of your team, which means if it is brand new, go talk to people in the industry. If it is new in your team, but others in your company has done, go talk to them as well. So get to the right people, get it. And then as a leader, you have to lead with a good vision, good goals, and then good clarity of what they need to do, at least for 2-3 months. And then certain learning, you have to accelerate and do it. And certain learning, I think you can slowly gain the learning as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sairam.
Sairam.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. You can post your questions in the group, or you can post them to your POCs, people who are left out. And we will make sure that we get the answers for all of you. We have our revered convener of National Leadership Program and the mastermind behind the Satsang series, Shri Gopi Krishna Pidatala. Uncle, I humbly request you to please speak a few words to us.
Saram, thank you, Nishta. I have told you 101 times, don't use that word, respected, revered, all these things. I'm just Gopi and Gulhia Aksar. So let's stick to that. Some norms in the Satsai organization. Let's not give grandeur to a position or anything. I'm a convener. I'm only a part-time guy here. Right. Thank you so much, Madhuri. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. And you nailed it, whatever you wanted to say. In fact, there was a discussion. She was asking me, what should I speak? I would like to speak something different. And she really brought out the essence of how to handle a crisis, basically, and how to manage your own teams. I'm sure that I will find many of you who are there on this call one day rising up to that level. Someday I would like to see my younger sister Madhuri as the president of Google in India. And I'll party to that day, Madhuri. We'll do that. And it's been a great day. I think bang on what is needed for this program. How do you transform yourself first, and then how do you get to the transformation of the world is something very pertinent. And that's the slogan and that's the motto of our organization, basically. So once again, stay blessed, Madhuri, and thank you, Bangaru, for being here again. Sairam.
Sairam Annaiya, thank you so much. Again, I think without you, I don't think I would have ever gotten this privilege, and Swami's blessings and you. I really pray to Swami that Swami and you will always be part of my life and keep inspiring me. And as I end this session, I really want to express my gratitude to Swami because, leadership is a journey. Parenting is a journey. And I have enjoyed every bit of my human journey, motherhood journey, leadership journey. It would not have happened without Swami. I mean, many people somewhere, I feel even emotional saying it because there are so many people, I think, who are even trying to make a meaning out of their journeys. And thanks to Swami, every journey I took on, he made it extremely memorable. I just feel he's with me in my mind, body, spirit, and heart, always guiding me. Like I said, these are difficult to comprehend with mind. But whatever it is, whatever you believe in, don't do anything on a part-time basis. Be fully involved. In my life, he played a major role in actually guiding through this. For example, I was telling OpenAI and a few of my close friends, when I became a VP of Google, everybody was congratulating me, but in my mind, I'm like, I'm actually a mere mortal. I don't think it is everything because of me, but it is this divine force guiding me. So I just want to leave you with this thing that if you have strong intent to do the right thing for others, right thing for the world, right thing for the societies, you believe me, the divine force will be with you. Whatever you believe in, that force will guide you. So start with a good intent. Be a great leader, transform the world will be a better place. And I wish you the very best in your leadership journeys.
पहली बात यह है, दाने दाने पे लिखा है खाने वाले का नाम. माधुरी के जिंदगी में लिखा है वैसा. So that is how she is actually bearing the fruit of what she is actually. The second part of it is very important, what she said right now. I remember once, I had asked Bhagwan in an interaction. Swami, they say that in Telugu, they said, Sivuni Agna Ledi Chivaina Kadildu. Without the blessings or the divine permission, even ant will not move actually. Hindi mein bhi kahavat hai. I don't know what the kahavat is. Maybe Nishta can tell me the kahavat kya hai. But then why do we need to actually believe in all these things, when it is already predetermined, predestined that everything happens? You know what Swami told me? He said, absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Without my concurrence, nothing will happen. My concurrence, my blessings, my consent is always there. But for that to happen, you have to put your efforts. See, Madhuri just said now, just so beautifully, she said, you have to put your 100% to that. 50%, 40%, 60% will not help. You have to put your heart and soul to this. And definitely, when you put your efforts and when you have that to do in your mind, your heart, that I need to achieve this, automatically divine blessings will flow full steam ahead. And this is what we need to learn. बैठे बैठे घर में बैठ के मुझे ये होना है, वो होना है, मुझे लॉटरी लगना है, मेरे को 1 करोड़ आना है, अरे मेरा भगवान का ब्लेसिंग आ जाएगा, वो कभी कभी हो सकता है, but उसमें भी है ना बार बार. I remember one youngster who was sitting in the Cyclone Hall. He had a Namajapam book. You know this Om Sri Sai Ram books that we write, Om Sri Sai Ram. You will not believe, we write Om Sri Sai Ram in that. This young boy was writing, Swami, please grant me an interview. Swami, please grant me an interview. Swami, please grant me. He wrote 11 books like that, I believe. And he was sitting beside me and he was writing in the Cyclone Hall. Swami came and called him for an interview. He put his efforts. So the prayer has to be there. The efforts have to be there. And I'm sure all you youngsters pray, put your efforts, do well, and you will definitely shine in your life. That's all I have to say today. And Brother Nimish was also there. Nimish Panyaji was also the All India President. Madhuri, he heard you till the end. He said, you know, I'm taking back something today, Gopi, from Madhuri, will and skill. He said, I will talk to her later also. That's a very important thing, you know, that I have learned from Madhuri today. He just called me and told me. I think great. Nishra, let's do the final honors now.
Sai Ram, everybody. We have come to the end of today's session, and I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude. Beginning with Swami, as ma'am also thanked Swami. We all would like to thank Swami that all of us are in this moment today together. Listening to ma'am, Sir AIP sir was also there with us. We are so thankful that we are in this moment. So first of all, ma'am, how do I even begin to talk about this candid satsang today? And I would just say you're such a soulful and wholesome energy. That's all I can say. The things that I think stuck with me the most, and I'm sure with everybody else, is the things you said, you know, focus on what matters, listen with awareness, look for answers within adversity, don't give up, step back to look forward, confidence and hope. And then your whole value system, basically, that you shared, people don't talk about these things generally. So the way you are relatable and the way you understand this generation in a workplace, I think very few people can understand. So thank you for that. And also thank you for being always, like last time also we heard you, for being open, for being so vulnerable, but also talking to us more like an elder sibling and less than a professional guest speaker. It's very helpful, to be honest, for people like us to hear you. So thank you actually for being an example. I would also like to thank our All India President, who's always been the greatest leader, one of the greatest leaders that we see. He was with us, he heard the whole session today. So I would like to thank him for joining us today. I would also like to thank Gopi uncle for always, of course, helping us begin and end these satsangs with such positive energy. And on top of that, bringing us Madhuri ma'am once again today. Last year, I was wishing that she keeps giving us satsangs, and that has happened. So thank you, uncle. Now coming to the amazing AV that we saw at the beginning, I would like to thank Ruday and the whole Satsangatve team. You always outdo yourselves and you will only keep escalating with whatever you do. So we can't wait for more. And you are truly the hub of creativity in the NLP ecosystem is what I would like to say. Thank you. I would also like to thank Raghupati for such a lovely introduction for ma'am. And at the end, I would like to thank our organizing team, our IT team, for always helping us run these programs smoothly. Also, the participants for being such keen listeners today. Thank you once again. Jai Sai Ram.
We will end with Shanti Mantra. Varun, over to you.
Samastalokaah sukhino bhavantu. Samastalokaah sukhino bhavantu. Samastalokaah sukhino bhavantu. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय।